Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Foreign Secretary chose his words very carefully about arms supplies that could be used in Gaza. Could he be a bit clearer with the House on this? Are we still supplying parts for F-35 jets that are used to bombard people in Gaza? Is the overflying of RAF planes from RAF Akrotiri over Gaza being shared, the information being shared with the Israeli military forces? And thirdly, is RAF Akrotiri being used as a staging point for the delivery of weapons to Israel in contravention of what he said about arms sales? Does he not realise that if we supply arms to a country that's complicit in war crimes, including genocide, we are also complicit in those war crimes?
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Israeli government is clearly hell-bent on their horrific plan of eradicating Palestine, with a continuing, ever-worsening genocide in Gaza and now approval of the shocking E1 plan that will divide the West Bank and East Jerusalem. So how can the government continue to take no further action when there are so many options open to them? How many times have we heard the Foreign Secretary say in this chamber that if things do not improve, if Israel does not desist, he will take further action, and yet he has not? When will this government take action, end UK complicity, take action to end the horror in Palestine?
Israel has been extremely precise in its language about what it was going to do in response to October the 7th. Their playbook of war crime, genocide, murder, starvation, water blockages, power cuts, bombing hospitals and schools was laid out in extreme detail for all of us to see. Nobody on this planet can say we did not know. And over the 23 months, there has been nothing that this government has done that has prevented Israel from enacting its line-by-line extermination plan. It doesn't want two states between Palestine and Israel. It actually doesn't care about the lives of the remaining hostages. So what will this government do to help Israel see sense and save lives, both the hostages and the Palestinians?
I read with alarm yesterday's report in the Washington Post detailing a plan that's circulating amongst the Trump administration about the future of Gaza. They call it the Great Plan. It proposes the total transformation of Gaza into a tourist region, a high-tech hub under temporary US administration. What's going to happen to the Gazans? Well, 2 million of them are going to be temporarily relocated to other countries, including Somaliland and South Sudan. Forced population transfer is contrary to and a complete violation of international humanitarian law. Madam Deputy Speaker, there must be serious thought given to the day after for Gaza, and my committee recommended as much in our report that was published in July. But this unserious, illegal and deeply dystopian plan cannot be the sum of that thinking. So what is the government doing to dissuade Donald Trump from following this path? And what, alongside regional and European allies, are we doing to put forward a serious plan for a peaceful future in Israel, Gaza and the West Bank, ready for the day after that this terrible war finally comes to an end?
Foreign Secretary.
The Foreign Secretary's statement on the 21st of July shocked this House, and we had a long debate about the situation in Gaza. Yet the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and the West Bank has deteriorated even further since then, as he has acknowledged. We've seen hundreds more Palestinians killed while seeking aid, famine declared in the Strip, a chronic lack of medical supplies attested to by UK medics volunteering in Nasser Hospital, the start of IDF operations in Gaza City, and the images of emaciated hostages still held in brutal captivity by Hamas terrorists. The human suffering is indeed beyond comprehension. Yet the extremists are indifferent. Hamas terrorists publish videos intended to torment the families of hostages. Cabinet members Ben-Gvir and Smotrich advocate for the forced displacement of Palestinians. In Israel, the Hostage Families Forum and the opposition parties call for an end to the violence. In the UK, Our constituents are desperate for the same. The bloodshed can only be stopped by decisive actions, actions which I regret the government has so far failed to take. The Prime Minister was wrong in principle to condition the recognition of Palestine on the actions of the Netanyahu government, and wrong in practice as he has been ignored. So will the Foreign Secretary confirm today that the UK will recognise Palestine later this month at the UN? The government must learn a lesson and now apply relentless pressure to the Netanyahu government. So Liberal Democrats call today on the Foreign Secretary finally to sanction Prime Minister Netanyahu for expanding his military campaign and pursuing the illegal expansion of the E1 settlements, and to take the steps necessary to ban the export of all UK arms to Israel, including F-35 components. Will he also make representations to the Qatari government, demanding that they exile Hamas from their political headquarters unless they agree to the release of all of the hostages immediately and unconditionally? Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary bemoans that words are not enough to alleviate the suffering. He acknowledges that the government has failed to move the combatants. Yet there is one man who could unlock progress. Donald Trump has the power to secure peace in Gaza if he chose to, by picking up the phone to Netanyahu. So will the Foreign Secretary tell the House how he will use his special relationship with Vice President Vance to help secure that goal? And will the government commit to making a ceasefire in Gaza a priority during President Trump's state visit?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement today on Palestinian statehood and the additional aid that has been announced for Gaza, as well as the recent work that has taken place to evacuate students and children in need of medical treatment. But today, Madam Deputy Speaker, the world's foremost group of genocide scholars have said that Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide in Article 2 of the UN Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. This is against the backdrop of Israel continuing to bombard Gaza, continuing to target and kill journalists, and continuing its policy of annexing the entire territory with Trumpian visions of Gaza, where the self-determination of Palestinians is little more than a real estate opportunity. Will the Foreign Secretary agree with me that this monumental resolution by genocide scholars should now trigger our responsibility to act?
Secretary. The International Association of Genocide Scholars has passed the resolution stating that Israel's policies and actions in Gaza meet the legal definition of genocide. I understand the Foreign Secretary doesn't comment on these matters from the dispatch box, so I'd like to ask instead what action and efforts this government are taking alongside international partners to ensure that evidence is being collected and matters are in hand to ensure that legal avenues can be pursued to address allegations of war crimes, crimes against humanity and allegations of genocide in Gaza. Foreign Secretary.
The answer the Foreign Secretary has just given, does he share my horror that among the thousands of civilian deaths that have occurred in Gaza, it's estimated that at least 200 journalists have been killed, some of them deliberately targeted? Does he agree that those of us who are supporters of Israel's right to defend itself need to tell the Israeli government that this is unacceptable and cannot continue?
Attempts to settle the E1 area of the West Bank, splitting Palestinian areas in two, in an Israeli government minister's own words, will bury the idea of a Palestinian state by the end of this month. Would the Secretary of State commit to a further coordinated response with European partners over the coming weeks to ensure that those destructive plans are halted?
In May, the government revealed in court that it, the executive, had made recent assessments of the risk of breaches of international humanitarian law in Gaza. I say breaches, but the government revealed that it had found only one possible breach of IHL among tens of thousands of airstrikes in Gaza across 11 months. Surely this proves that the FCDO does not have the capacity to properly assess all the possible breaches of IHL in Gaza.
The Foreign Secretary in his statement outlined all of the steps that this government has taken against the Netanyahu government. He has also repeatedly said that the UK has done everything it can. In my mind, both are tacit admittances of defeat, as we have seen the Netanyahu government increase its activity in Gaza, increase its prosecution and persecution of the Gazan people. My question to the Foreign Secretary is, if we have done so much and had no effect, if there is nothing left to do, what does he expect to change before the UN General Assembly meeting, and why should we not immediately recognise a Palestinian state?
The Foreign Secretary has just said that on the ground it is unimaginably bleak. Horrifying images and accounts will be seared into the minds of colleagues across this House. They are almost impossible to put into words, but we can and we must be precise with our language. I agree. It's a genocide, isn't it?
Foreign Secretary.
Speaker, Benjamin Netanyahu's blockade and weaponization of starvation has plunged Gaza into famine. And that is why the UN Secretary-General has described this man-made catastrophe as a failure of humanity. And while children die of hunger, unfortunately, we have a situation whereby the Israeli government continues to deny the existence of starvation in the very territory that it seeks to occupy. Now, before the summer recess, my right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary, informed the House about additional aid for Gaza. Can he inform us just how much of that aid has actually got into Gaza, and what other further urgent steps is the government taking to bring this inhumane treatment of the population of the Palestinians to an end?
Madam Deputy Speaker, another, I'm afraid, profoundly disappointing statement from the Foreign Secretary, devoid of anything that is likely to bring a swift end to this conflict. While at home, the police have been arresting vicars and grannies, and the government's been hiring American spy planes to fly over Gaza, as he himself said, the Israelis have intensified that campaign, their aggression and the slaughter of innocents in that awful conflict. And everything he said, all his condemnation has come to nothing. In every statement I've been in this chamber that he's spoken at, he's stressed the importance of international humanitarian law. So my question today is why he's been so passive in defending the International Criminal Court in the face of another wave of American sanctions. What steps is he going to take to support that institution and the individuals that staff it in the face of these sanctions? And what discussions has he had with the American government to get them to reverse them?
The Foreign Secretary will be aware that increasing numbers of human rights experts and genocide scholars assess that Israel's actions in Gaza equate to a genocide, with famine deliberately created and hospitals bombed to kill journalists. Against this backdrop, the government is right to recognise the state of Palestine and to do so in a way which tries to drive change on the ground. Can I ask the Foreign Secretary, does he share my deep concern at the unacceptable new restrictions on visas and registration set to shut down the work of the most effective international humanitarian organisations in Gaza, and what action is the government taking to try to prevent this?
Israel's decision to further escalate operations in Gaza and expand further into Gaza City, where famine has officially been declared, shows that Israel simply is not listening to our concerns. And given that the government has raised concerns over and over again, suspended free trade, suspended some arms licenses, it almost says to me that Israel is kind of mocking our government. So I just wondered, is it time to take further measures and ensure that we fulfil the UK's obligations as a third state under international law? Because we could be at risk here.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The war in Gaza is horrific on a number of different levels. However, I'd like to particularly focus on one level, and that it is the deadliest conflict for journalists. Journalists who often act as our window into atrocities. Will the Secretary of State please explain why we are selling any arms to Israel?
This morning, the Scottish Labour leader told a press conference in Glasgow that, and I quote, "There is a genocide happening in Gaza. I believe that Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal and he will have to face further sanctions." Madam Deputy Speaker, does the Foreign Secretary agree?
Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for making it clear that this country has its historic responsibilities in the region, and he's been consistent in calling for a ceasefire month after month. That hasn't happened. So I just ask him in all sincerity, what changes does he really expect by simply continuing to repeat that? And if Israel has agency, has the ability to qualify through those unless statements whether recognition is granted, I ask him to reflect upon that, and in answer to the earlier exchange around the potential for a peacekeeping force, surely it should not be that Israel has the ability to put a block on that. The people of Palestine deserve better than that, surely.
Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary asks what more this government can do to ensure the genocide in Gaza is ended. Might I suggest that the doctrine of responsibility to protect is enacted by the United Nations, and any and all means possible are exhausted to demand an end to genocide, intervene to defend the helpless, intervene to help the trapped and starved civilians of Gaza, half of which, if I may remind the House, is made up of children. Act now, immediately.
Instead of taking substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to an immediate ceasefire and long-term sustainable peace, the Israeli government has ignored us. They've failed to let aid go through and created a man-made famine. It appears to me that the only people that the Israeli government will listen to is Donald Trump and the United States. So can the Foreign Secretary please confirm what discussions he has had with Donald Trump to take action against the Israeli government?